Hey guys, welcome back to Salty Ginger Talk. Thanks for coming back. Glad to have you here. So, in today's episode, we're going to talk about why you should always do what you're afraid of doing. And so, let's take a step back real quick and just say, if it's something there's reason to be afraid of, walking down a dark street at night, or not driving your car 100 miles an hour, or something that's going to cause you physical harm. Obviously, we're not talking about those things, but there's so many things in life where we kind of twist ourselves in knots and we're paralyzed because we're afraid of the uncertainty of the outcome of taking those actions. And that's what we're talking about here. Why should you always do what you're afraid of doing? So, fear is good in the term that it can be a good motivator if you learn how to harness it correctly. It can also paralyze you and actually make you do the opposite of what is actually good for you. So, a couple of examples from my personal life. When I was a kid, I've always been fairly aggressive, willing to kind of go up to people and talk to them and not afraid of a lot in social situations. However, I hated calling people on the phone and asking them questions I didn't know the answers to. So, when I was a kid, there was no internet, there was no texting, there was no any of those things. You either talked to someone in person or you called them on the phone. And it never bothered me to talk to people in person, but calling them on the phone for whatever reason, it was a real mental block for me. So, kudos to my mother. She forced me in many situations to pick up the phone, call people, and ask them questions I didn't know the answer to. So, it may seem like a silly little thing, and maybe it never bothered you for whatever reason. It was a big mental block for me personally. Now, who cares, right? I'm 52. I got a lot of life experience. I pick up the phone, I ask questions, I get the answers I need, or I don't. I keep working and I move on. Not a big deal. Also, I'm super Irish. I've got very fair skin. I don't do well in the sun. I can burn in the shade. Literally, I can be in the shade and burn on a super hot day when the sun is at its most powerful. So I need to see a dermatologist on a regular basis. And for whatever reason, I was too busy. I couldn't fit it in my schedule, blah, blah, blah. I found reasons not to go see a dermatologist. So I finally went and started seeing a dermatologist several years ago. And in my very first visit, they found a spot on my leg and took a pretty significant chunk of flesh out of my leg that was cancerous. Wound up being no big deal, but if I'd let that go, could have been a real problem. And it's because I didn't want to go see the doctor, right? So I should have done that because I didn't want to do it. And that's the kind of thought process that we're trying to foster here is instead of letting something that you don't like or something you're worried about, something that makes you anxious, instead of letting it stop you, let's learn to confront it. Let's learn to take it on head on. And almost every situation that you do that in, you're going to wind up in a better spot and it's going to be a much bigger non-event than you ever anticipated it being. Most of the time, these dire things or consequences that await us are in our head. They don't exist in reality. So avoiding tackling problems, avoiding having difficult conversations, avoiding changing your habits that are impacting your life in a negative way are all things that you have control over. You can change those behaviors, but you have to make a conscious decision that you want to change those behaviors. So one thing I'll say, you can only be courageous when you're afraid of something. If other people are afraid of it and you're not afraid of it and you do it anyways, that's not really courage on your part. Other people might see it as courageous, but if you're not afraid of it, you can't be brave. So you can only show courage when you're afraid of something. And that it's a good thing to show courage. Take the hard swallow, set your feet, and take on the challenge. And you develop courage by doing courageous acts. So if you're going to develop courage and become braver, become more self-assured, become more self-confident, you need to take on the things that you're afraid of. That can be lots of things. It could be going after a promotion at work. It could be trying to find a partner to share your life with. It can be going back to college. It can be whatever your version of it is. It doesn't matter what your mental roadblocks are. Everybody's got them. Nobody's germane. Nobody's immune to mental roadblocks or things that they're afraid of. I don't like teeth. Teeth bother me. They scare me. So I've never had a cavity in my life. But I did have to have my wisdom teeth removed. And so I went and saw an oral surgeon. And he said, look, you've got a lot of space in your mouth. Your wisdom teeth are growing in great. It will be no problem to remove them. He said, you'll hear some crunching. And I'm like, whoa, time out. Nope, let's stop right there. I said, you need to put me under to do this surgery. And he said, no, it would take me longer to put you under, do the surgery, and bring you out from the anesthesia than it would be just to numb the spots in your jaw and take the teeth out. And I said, well, I can just tell you that if I start hearing crunching in my mouth, there's not enough people in this office to hold me in that chair when you do the surgery. So you're going to need to put me out, which is funny because even though like I'm a big guy, I've always been a big guy and strong and blah, 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 blah. But I don't drink. I've never taken an illegal drug in my life. It's just not my thing. It's not a judgment thing to me. A lot of my friends drink. A lot of my friends have used drugs. Not a big issue for me. It's just something I have not chosen to partake in. But what that means is when any of those types of substances hit my system, they throw me for a loop. And I look like the kind of guy you would need to give a huge dose of those things to, because like it would take an elephant tranquilizer to keep me on my back. Well, that's not the case. So it took a long time for them to put me out and bring me out of the anesthesia because they always give me more anesthesia than I need. Because again, I'm a big guy and that stuff is foreign to my system. So it really throws my system for a loop. But wisdom teeth are out, still never had a cavity. It's all good. But that was something that I needed to do that I didn't want to do. I don't like people screwing with my teeth. Like when my kids had loose teeth when they were kids, I'd be like, go show your mother. I don't want to look at it. So everybody's got their thing, is my point. It doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if it's something silly like loose teeth with your kids. You know it's natural. You know it's normal. I hated it. My wife handled all that. So with all that, here's some things that you can use to think about to help you stay calm, to help you take action, and help you face something you fear. And I'm encouraging you to pick something. I don't know if it's every day, every week, but don't let fear stop you. The more you're afraid of something, the more you should try to confront it. The bigger of a challenge it is in your mind, the more important it is for you as a person to take that challenge on and learn how to deal with it and put it behind you. It could be the fear of going out in open spaces. It could be the fear of heights. It could be the fear of anything crazy. I knew a woman that was afraid of birds. And when we would walk out of a building, if we saw a bird, she would literally grab my arm and hide behind me. It could be a little, swallow, sparrow, tiny little bird sitting on the ground looking for worms. She did not like birds. And so it doesn't matter what it is. Everybody's got their thing. But I would encourage you to take action on those things. So let's go through some mental exercises you can use to help you get through those situations. So the first one, think through the worst case scenario. I mean, what is like the absolute worst thing that could happen? And I've done this a lot with my wife through our marriage because she's a very anxious person. So she would express fear or concern about something. And I would say, okay, so like in your mind, what's the absolute worst outcome from that example you just gave me? And she would say, okay, I've got it. And I'd say, no, say it out loud. Let's talk through it. Let's talk through what the worst case scenario is. So she was the PTO president at a couple of the schools our kids went to. And she didn't like public speaking. She didn't like running the meetings. And she said, well, I'm afraid of saying something and looking stupid. I said, okay, let's say you say something really stupid. Then what happens? Well, everyone would laugh at me and think I'm stupid. I'd say, okay, then what happens? Well, nothing. Right. So I just want to make sure I understand that what you're afraid of is a bunch of people that you don't really know, you don't really care all that much about, other than they have aligned goals, that they have kids the same age as your kids in the same school, and you're worried about what they think of you. Like, why? What do you think they're like so much more intelligent than you? Like, you're a very smart person. So what if you say something stupid? I've made a pretty good career out of saying stupid stuff. So once you face that, it becomes much less worrisome. Plus, you've got a worst case scenario in your head and you can develop coping mechanisms. If I do say something stupid, I'm just going to laugh it off, make a joke, and move on. Or I'm going to apologize and tell people I didn't mean what I said and clarify my statement. Now, if the worst case scenario in your mind does happen, you've got a plan B in place. And that's how a lot of scenario, and they have plans in place if worst case scenario starts to develop. And that gives them the courage to push forward in their business venture because they've got a plan in place that they can implement if worst case scenario happens. Now, me personally, I surround myself with people who are more anxious and who are pessimistic because I don't think like that. And it's not good that I don't think like that from a business perspective. it's good to be prepared for other outcomes than just the best outcome or just a good outcome. Now, I've always had a lot of confidence that I could deal with whatever outcome happened, but it's so much more useful to have a plan in place and be able to implement that plan if it becomes necessary. So, the first thing I would encourage you to do is just think through the worst case scenario, write it down, talk through it with somebody else. It doesn't matter if you think it's silly, it doesn't matter if it makes you uncomfortable or you think you're going to look foolish if you discuss it with people. So what? It's better than living your life in fear. It's better than letting your fear of taking action holding you back. So that takes us to the second thing, which is face your fears. You got to admit that you're worried about something or that you're nervous about something or that something makes you uncomfortable. It doesn't matter if it's stupid. It doesn't matter if it's silly. It doesn't matter if you think other people will think it's weird. So what? Remember, 100 years from now, we're all going to be dead. No one's going to remember any of this stuff that we did. Someone else will live in the house you live in right now. If there's material possessions that you had, someone else will have those. None of this is going to matter. So it's terribly important to face your fears head on. Don't ignore them. Don't pretend they don't exist. Don't dismiss them away as something else. There's a reason that you have intuitions. There's a reason that you have feelings that you feel. Even if they're irrational and abnormal, you can tackle them. And we're doing an episode later this week that talks about what actually causes anxiety. What is it? What are the things in your body that cause anxiety so that you can have an understanding of what's going on inside your body, because it's not necessarily like your fault that you're nervous or worried or anxious. Some of it's genetic, some of it's the chemical reactions that happen in your body, some of it's how your brain is wired and how it works. But you do have control over that, and you can fix those things if you choose to confront them. But you can't confront them and put a plan together to overcome them if you won't face them. So that's why we say you should always do what you're afraid of doing, because it forces you to face it. If you're afraid of heights, maybe you start off by climbing up a 6-foot ladder and hanging light bulbs or something like that, and you progress from there. But you take little steps in facing your fear, developing the self-confidence you need to overcome that fear. And maybe you need help. Maybe someone holds your hand while you do it. Maybe someone holds a ladder while you do it. But you've got to face it, and you've got to start putting a plan together to take action to make it something that you no longer are afraid of, or at least not something that stops you from taking action, even if you continue to have concerns about it. So you got to face it. Number 3, understand that your fear often makes you do the opposite of what's best for you. So if you're trying to lose weight and you don't want to go to the gym because you know you're out of shape and people are going to look at you and judge you and laugh at you, what does that fear make you do? It makes you avoid the gym. A lot of times people will eat to prevent themselves from going to the gym because they feel bad about the decision that they've made. So that fear is making you do the opposite of what's best for you, because what's best for you is you get exercise every day. What's best for you is to have a healthy diet. And that fear is kind of compounding the actions that are going on inside your brain and making you make decisions that are actually against your best interest. If you're afraid of social situations, it forces you to stay reserved. It forces you to not interact with people. You choose to isolate yourself, and that's not a good place to be. You know, we all need people, whether you want to admit that or not. And I'm much more independent than most people are. I prefer a lot of alone time, not because I'm afraid of social situations, but because I like to use that time to gather my thoughts, to really drive after the goals that I've set for myself. And but you still need people. For me, it's my family and a close group of friends. Most people need a much bigger social circle than that. And if you're afraid of those social situations, it forces you, it makes you choose to take actions that are detrimental to your physical and mental health. So by doing something that you're afraid of doing, by confronting that fear and taking actions, even if it's small actions, working towards bigger actions over a period of time, it's going to make you make the decisions that are best for you. And generally, when you're afraid of something, there's not a good reason that you're afraid of it. The worst case scenario that you're playing out in your head rarely comes to fruition. So understand that if you are afraid of something and you allow that to stop you from taking action, it's actually making you make decisions that are not in your best interest. They're the opposite. Which leads us to our last. Always remind yourself, you have control over this. You have control over how this makes you feel. You have control over how you react to these situations. And the best way to take control of that is to take action. Action is a verb. It is something you take. It is something you do. It's not thinking about it. It's not reading about it. It's not researching it. It's actually doing what you're afraid of doing. And that's the best way to take control of situations. Like we've talked about, if you have someone that you're not fond of or that rubs you the wrong way, the best way to build a better relationship is by spending more time having more conversations, getting to know that person better than not. And look, I've played on a lot of teams and I've been involved in a lot of group situations where I'm the new person to the group. And that's one of the first things I do is I start interacting with people on a regular basis to get to know them, to get to know how they think, to get to know what makes them tick, so that I can contribute in a productive way and I can interact with those people in a way that they find useful and that they receive in the best way possible. So by taking control of the situation and by actually doing the things that you're afraid of, you can mitigate the anxiousness and the fear that's in your mind. So I don't care what it is. We've listed off a bunch of just kind of random thoughts about things that people can be afraid of. It doesn't matter what. Maybe you're afraid of clowns. Go to the circus with a friend where they've got a lot of clowns. Go to a birthday party where there's a clown. You can overcome those fears by taking action, by putting yourself in situations where you're forced to confront those, and by really controlling your thought process. So those are the tips that we would give to use to do the things that you're afraid of doing. But I can't stress this enough. If you're afraid of something, if you're worried about something, the best way to overcome that fear is to take action and do the thing. Just do the thing. I would argue that a good plan today is much better than a perfect plan next week. Put a plan together, take action, measure the results. If you got the result that you wanted, take the action again. If you didn't get the result that you wanted, take a different action or tweak the action that you took. But taking action is always the best way to face your fears. It's always the best way to mentally overcome hurdles and obstacles that you are putting in front of yourself. So if you guys found that useful, I enjoyed putting this episode together because I know several people that I think will get a big benefit out of this that watch our podcast regularly. So I hope you do as well. Would love to hear what you have to say. Leave us a comment in whatever platform that you consume our content on. Also, don't forget to head over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All of our podcast episodes are available there. We've got a daily newsletter that you can subscribe to there. We put it out every weekday. And it's also got links to our other social media accounts. And don't forget to like and comment and subscribe to our channel on whatever platform you consume it on. Thanks again for coming back, guys. We appreciate the support so much. Everybody have a great week, and we will see you next time.